He raised his glass and said, "To my sister Haley, maybe she should stick to stripping." The room erupted in laughter, my father laughing loudest of all. But I didn't flinch. I was counting seconds because I knew the oak doors would swing open at exactly 9 p.m. And behind them stood the CEO holding evidence that my brother had stolen my code and committed insider trading. There was Daniel and there was me, the golden boy and the experiment that didn't work. Daniel was everything my parents had ever wanted, straight A's. Student council president. The first car at 16. A full-ride scholarship to Northwestern. My father talked about him at every barbecue, clapping him on the shoulder like he'd personally invented success. "My son. The genius," he'd say, voice booming across the patio. "My son. The leader." And Daniel would smile that perfect white-toothed grin, basking in the warmth of approval like it was sunlight. I was the ghost at the dinner table. Too quiet. Too sensitive. Too much. I didn't run for class office or lead debate teams. I locked myself in my room and took apart old computers, reassembling them into something faster. Sleeker, not that anyone noticed. At family gatherings, I sat at the edge of the couch, my fingers itching to code while everyone worshipped at the altar of Daniel Nolan's accomplishments. Every holiday was the same ritual. Christmas morning, Daniel would unwrap a brand new laptop, top of the line, while my father beamed. For his future, he'd announce I'd get a gift card to a department store, folded inside an envelope with a note in my mother's handwriting. "Maybe you could try to look nicer." Hale. As if my value was measured in how well I could hide. As if the only thing wrong with me was the way I dressed. Every dinner was a performance. Daniel would hold court, recounting his latest debate win or the glowing feedback from his internship at Hayward Technologies. My father's eyes would shine. His fork paused midair, utterly captivated. Then inevitably he'd turn to me, not really looking at me, just making eye contact long enough to ask, still playing with those toys. "Hale, I'm learning to code." "Dad." "Right," he'd say, and twist back toward Daniel. "So, about that internship, tell me more." I learned to make myself small. I learned to apologize for taking up space. I shrank my voice. My dreams. My very existence so that Daniel could keep shining. That was the unwritten rule of the Nolan household, he shined. And I apologized. Every single day. The worst part wasn't the neglect, it was the consistency. Year after year. Report card after report card. My A's in math and computer science were met with a dismissive nod, while Daniel's B+ in English was celebrated with a steak dinner. I remember one Thanksgiving when I'd won a regional coding competition. I practiced the announcement in the mirror for an hour, rehearsing the casual tone I'd use at the table. "Oh, by the way, I placed first in the Midwest Tech Challenge." My father barely looked up from his turkey. "That's nice." "Honey," he said. Then he turned to Daniel. "How's that marketing project going? I heard the VP mentioned you in a meeting." I sat there, my fork hovering over a cold plate of mashed potatoes, and I felt the familiar weight settle in my chest, the heavy knowledge that I would never, ever be enough. Not smart enough. Not loud enough. Not Daniel enough. So I learned to apologize. For wanting a bigger piece of the pie. For asking to be seen. For existing in a house that only had room for one favorite child. And the whole time, Daniel watched me shrink with that same polished smirk. The one that said, "I know my place. And yours is below me." I didn't know it then. But that smirk was the blueprint for everything he would steal from me. The technical debt I'd eventually collect in full. I remember the day I got the offer from Hayward Technologies like it was branded into my skull. I was sitting on my mattress in my tiny studio apartment, staring at the email with the subject line "Offer Letter, Junior Developer." Hayward Technologies. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. 18 months of working nights, weekends, and every holiday at a dead-end QA job. And someone had finally read my portfolio. Someone had seen the code I wrote at 2 a.m. and said, "Yes, she belongs here," I told my parents at Sunday dinner. The same table where Daniel's accomplishments were carved into the wood like trophies. My mother was passing the roast, and my father was already halfway through a story about Daniel's latest marketing campaign tripled engagement in Q2. You know, real leadership material. I waited for a pause. I cleared my throat. "I got a job," I said. "At Hayward Technologies. Junior developer." The silence that followed was so thick I could taste it. My father set down his fork. He didn't smile. He raised one eyebrow. The way he did when he was about to deliver a verdict. "Hayward," he said. Like the name itself was a question. "That's a serious place." "Hale, are you sure you're ready for that?" "Ready?" The word hit me like a slap. 4 years of computer science, 3 internships. A personal project that ran faster than anything their current developers had shipped. And he asked if I was ready. Daniel, who was already working at Hayward in marketing, leaned back in his chair. He gave me that smile all teeth. No warmth. I'd seen it 1,000 times. It was the smile he wore right before he took something from me. "That's great. Hale," he said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. His palm was warm, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "Just try not to get emotional this time." I felt my stomach tighten. "Emotional, you know," he said, leaning back again, tilting his chair like he owned the room. "You're very passionate. Some people in a corporate environment, they call that instability. You just have to be careful." My mother nodded, her eyes fixed on her plate. "He's right. Dear, listen to your brother. He knows how all this works." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded back. I was so used to swallowing that I barely tasted it anymore. So, I went to work. For 18 months. I came in before the sun, left after the janitor, solved problems nobody else could crack, and kept my head down. I didn't talk about my ideas. I didn't volunteer in meetings. I just coded. I built. I poured my entire self into lines of Python and SQL, hoping that the work itself would speak for me. And in the quiet hours, when the office lights dimmed and the hum of servers was the only sound, I started building something more, something I called Project Halo. A predictive AI that could see risk before it happened. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, perfect enough, they would finally see me. I didn't know that Daniel was already watching. I called it Project Halo. I spent 3 weekends just sketching the architecture on napkins, on the back of old pay stubs, on the margin of a takeout menu. It was a predictive AI that could ingest market trends, internal emails flagged as high priority, and financial reports from competing firms. Most corporate AI systems are clunky. They look at past data and tell you what already happened, like a rear-view mirror. Mine was different. It could foresee corporate risk. It could flag a bad quarter 3 months before the numbers dropped, spot a product failure before it launched, and trace the hidden links between an offhand email from a supplier and a stock dip 2 weeks later. I built it in the quiet corners of the office during lunch breaks. Hunched over my monitor with a sandwich going stale beside me, I built it at 3 a.m. in my tiny apartment, my eyes burning from staring at lines of code. The only light coming from the screen and the flicker of a street lamp outside. My back ached from the folding chair. My fingers cramped. But the code was beautiful fast. Smart. Elegant. I had taken my entire mind. Every pattern I had ever seen. every hunch I had ever trusted and translated it into logic and mathematics. It was the first thing I had ever made that felt fully mine, deep in the core file, buried inside a non-executing comment line where no one would ever think to look. I typed 3 letters HJN. Holly Jane Nolan. A tiny, secret piece of pride. A digital signature that whispered, I was here. This is mine. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't frame it or tweet about it. I just left it there, like a seed in the dirt, and hoped that one day it would grow into something that proved I existed. Have you ever poured your soul into something only to have it stolen before you could show the world? That's what Daniel did. But he didn't know about the initials. He never even opened the source code. He just copied the folder, pasted it, and renamed it Guardian. And because he was a salesman, not a builder, he never thought to look inside. 2 weeks before I would have presented Project Halo to my boss, I found him at the coffee machine. It was 8:04 a.m. on a Tuesday, I remember, because I had been awake since 4:30 a.m., polishing the presentation deck, running through the demo in my head one last time. I was exhausted, but I was buzzing. In 12 days, I was going to show the VP of engineering something that would change the way Hayward understood its own data. And no one, not my father, not my mother, not Daniel, could take that away from me. I was pouring my 3rd cup of coffee when I heard footsteps behind me. I hear you're working on something interesting. Hello? It was Daniel's voice. Light and casual. The same tone he used when he asked about my weekend at Sunday dinners. But there was a sharpness underneath. A wire-thin tension. I turned around. He was leaning against the counter, holding a paper cup of water, wearing that smile that never reached his eyes. My blood went cold. My mouth went dry. It's just a side project, I said. I looked down at the coffee, at the swirl of cream dissolving. I couldn't meet his gaze. You should be careful with side projects, he said, taking a slow sip of water. They can distract you from your real job. I nodded. My fingers tightened around the mug. I know. Thanks. Daniel. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, letting the silence stretch until it felt like a weight pressing on my chest. Just looking out for you? Little sister, he said finally. And then he walked away. His footsteps echoing on the polished floor. I stood at the coffee machine for a long time after he left. My hands were shaking. He was in marketing. Marketing had nothing to do with my project. He shouldn't have even known I had a side project. Unless he was watching my network activity. Unless he had someone on the engineering floor feeding him information. Unless he was already planning what to do. Have you ever had someone smile at you while they were sharpening the knife? That morning, I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that Daniel was just being his usual overbearing older brother self, that he couldn't possibly know what I was building. But deep down, in the part of me that had learned to read the silences at our dinner table, I knew the truth. He had been monitoring me from the inside. He had seen the files I was accessing, the late-night login timestamps, the conversations I had with the infrastructure team about server allocation. He was watching, and he was waiting. I should have known then what he was capable of. I should have encrypted my folder better, changed my passwords, told my boss immediately. But I was still naive. I still believed that family meant something, that the brother who had once taught me to ride a bike couldn't possibly destroy me for a promotion. I was wrong. And 4 weeks later, I was standing in the lobby of Hayward Technologies with a cardboard box in my arms. My keycard already deactivated. My name blacklisted. And Project Halo still sitting on the server, waiting for Daniel's password to unlock it. The clock on the wall read 1047 a.m. When my keycard stopped working, I swiped it at the turnstile, nothing. I tried again. The little light stayed red. The security guard behind the desk didn't look at me. He just said, "Ms. Nolan, please come with me." I followed him to the HR office on the second floor. He stood by the door with his arms crossed while a woman in a stiff blazer closed the blinds. She didn't offer me a seat. "We're terminating your employment for workplace instability," she said. The word instability landed like a slap. A word Daniel had planted at the dinner table months ago. A seed that had grown into a weed strangling my entire career. What did I do? My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. She glanced at a folder on her desk. "Not at me. We can't discuss the specifics, but we've received reports. You're seen as unreliable. Volatile." She pushed a cardboard box across the table. "Please collect your personal belongings and leave the building." I walked to my cubicle in a fog. The box was small and flimsy. I dropped in my coffee mug the one that said, "World's okayest coder." A joke from a colleague I'd never see again. Me notebook. Half filled with pseudocode for Project Halo. A wilted succulent I'd forgotten to water. 18 months of my life. Reduced to garbage. I didn't even clear my desk. I just walked out past the silent rows of monitors. Past the whispered rumors. Past the elevator where Sarah, the junior admin, stood with her hand over her mouth. She looked at me like I was a ghost. For 2 weeks I sat in my apartment and stared at the wall. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't answer my phone. I watched the light move across the carpet from morning to night and back again. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, a new email popped into my inbox. The subject line read, "I'm so sorry." It was from Sarah. She wrote that she was the one who filed the HR reports, but she was following orders, Daniel's orders. He had forwarded emails I'd sent to him, but he'd doctored them, rewritten them to sound angry and paranoid. He told HR I was having episodes. The final knife, he wanted your project. Hale. He told his boss it was his. I read that email 7 times. I didn't cry. Something inside me went quiet and cold. A door closed, and a lock clicked shut. I knew in that moment that the girl who trusted her family was gone. And something else, something patient and precise, had taken her place. Have you ever had someone smile at you while they were sharpening the knife? That's the moment you decide whether to bleed quietly or to build a sword of your own. I chose to build. 6 months later, I was scrolling through a tech news site on my phone, trying to figure out how to pay rent. I had 83 inches my checking account, a stack of overdue notices on the counter, and a freelance job cleaning malware off a dentist's practice computer, due the next morning, that would net me exactly $200. I was calculating how many more of those gigs I'd need to cover my security deposit when my thumb stopped mid-scroll. Daniel's face filled the screen. That perfect white-toothed grin. The one that made venture capitalists open their wallets and my parents forget I existed. Was beaming next to a man I recognized as the CEO of Hayward Technologies. The headline punched me in the chest. Daniel Nolan's breakthrough AI saves Hayward Technologies. I read the article once. Then again. The words blurring. The Guardian system. They called it. A revolutionary predictive data AI that had saved the company millions. Mr. Nolan's system. The article said, quoting, "Daniel, we call it the Guardian system. It was a labor of love. My system. My project Halo. The code I built at 3 a.m. with burning eyes and stale coffee. The algorithm I signed with 3 letters deep in the core file." My hand started shaking. The phone slipped and clattered onto the floor. I picked it up, read the article a 3rd time, and felt something inside me change. My heart didn't break. It had broken so many times already. That was an old, familiar pain. A bruise I'd learned to live with. This was different. My heart calcified. It turned from something soft into something hard. Cold. And patient. Have you ever had someone steal not just your work, but your name and then smile about it on a national stage while you're counting pennies for rent? That's when you realize the person you thought you knew was never real. He didn't just get me fired. He stole my work. He stole my name. He stole the only thing I had ever built that mattered. And he thought I would break, cry, and disappear into the silence I had always lived in. He was wrong. I was done being the ghost. I picked up my laptop, took a slow breath, and started digging. I knew Daniel was sloppy. He always had been. He was a salesman. Not a builder he could charm a boardroom into believing anything. But he couldn't read a single line of JSON without breaking into a sweat. He wouldn't have understood my code well enough to clean it properly. He would just copy, paste, and rename files. Maybe change a few variable names to make it look like his own. But he wouldn't dig deep enough. He wouldn't think to check the non-executing comment lines buried in the core. He would have left my initials behind. I knew it with a certainty that felt like gravity. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim apartment. I pulled up a messaging window to Mike, a coder I'd worked with on the security team back when I was still human to them. Before I became a ghost. He was one of the few people at Hayward who had ever treated me like a colleague, not a diagnosis. I typed fast. My fingers steady. Hey. Weird request. Can you get into the source code for the Guardian system, the new one Daniel's been showing off? Run a search for something. A minute later, his reply popped up. Search for what? I typed the 3 letters HJN. Then I waited. 5 minutes passed. They felt like 5 years. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of my refrigerator and the thud of my own blood in my ears. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the cursor blinking in the chat window. Watching the seconds tick by, my throat went dry. What if he hadn't left it? What if he'd been smart for once? What if the only proof I had was a folder of stolen files and a story no one would believe? Then Mike's reply appeared. Hale. It's here. It's in the core file. What is going on? I read those words 3 times. The air left my lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to my kitchen. I opened the cabinet, took out a glass, filled it with cold tap water, and drank it slow and steady. The water tasted clean. The world felt quiet and sharp. I set the glass down. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, a woman in a worn-out hoodie. Hair pulled back. Eyes that had seen too much, but were finally clear. The outline of revenge was forming in my mind. It wasn't a flash of anger or a desperate plan. It was cold. Precise. Methodical. Like code. Like the algorithm I'd built. I knew exactly what I was going to do. It would take time. But I had time. I had nothing but time. And I had something Daniel didn't understand: patience. The quiet kind. The kind that waits until the moment is perfect. And then strikes without mercy. I needed money. I needed access. I needed to become invisible and fast. No legitimate tech firm would touch my resume. I had applied to 47 jobs in 3 weeks after Sarah's email. Tailoring each cover letter. Attaching my portfolio. Referencing my 2 years at Hayward. Every response was the same variation of, "We've reviewed your application and decided to move forward with other candidates." One recruiter actually called me and said, "Look, I'm just being honest. Your name came up in a background check as unstable. I can't take that risk." Unstable. Volatile. Daniel's words. His poison. Had circled back through HR databases and reference checks until my name was a liability. So I stopped being Haley Nolan. I became H. Nolan, 88, on a freelance cybersecurity platform that didn't ask for real names or employment history. They just wanted to verify I could do the work. I passed their skill test in under an hour. My first job was cleaning a CryptoLocker virus off a 15-year-old server for a family-run hardware store in a suburb of Cleveland. Paid $180. I did it in 3 hours. The owner was so grateful he left me a 5-star review. That review opened the floodgates. I took every job nobody else wanted. Scrubbing malware from dental practice terminals. Running penetration tests for startups that paid in equity and promises. Recovering corrupted databases from small law firms. The work was grimy, repetitive, and underpaid, but it was honest. And it was invisible. I worked late into the night. The only light in my apartment coming from the glow of my monitor. My apartment was bare, a mattress on the floor. A folding table I'd picked up from a garage sale for $15. And my laptop. That was it. No TV. No couch. No pictures on the wall. I didn't need comfort. I needed distance. Every dollar I earned went to 2 things: rent for a studio, so small the kitchen and bedroom were the same room, and better equipment. I bought a used laptop for $400. A second monitor for $120. A reliable external hard drive for encrypted backups. Each piece felt like a brick in a ladder I was building in the dark. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from nothing when the whole world thought you were broken? And every night? After the freelance work was done, after I'd cleaned a virus at 2 a.m. or patched a server at 4 a.m., I worked on my real job. My actual job. The one I'd started the moment I saw Mike's message. I opened my encrypted folder. I studied Daniel's habits, his passwords, his blind spots. I mapped his network at Hayward. The same network I'd once belonged to. I didn't sleep much. I didn't need sleep. I needed access. And night by night, line by line, I was building the key. 3 hours. That's all it took to get into Daniel's personal email. 3 hours of sitting cross-legged on my mattress. The only light in the room, the blue glow of my monitor. My fingers moving slow and deliberate. Arrogant people are lazy about security, and Daniel was the most arrogant person I'd ever known. He used the same password for his personal email that he'd used for his high school student portal. Just with the year updated. I knew because I'd watched him type it once at a family dinner when he checked his phone under the table. The password was simple: Max Eagles 1990, his dog's name, his high school mascot, and the birth year he lied about to seem younger. I typed it in. The inbox opened. It felt like picking a lock with a paperclip. From his email. I reset his password for his cloud storage. He hadn't enabled 2-factor authentication. He was that lazy. The storage opened like a vault with the door left ajar. And there it was, a folder labeled Haley. Just that. My full name as a digital coffin. Inside were subfolders, emails faked, drafts, forged, access logs. He had documented everything he'd done to destroy me. Like a trophy collection. I clicked through each file slowly. My heart not pounding. Just ticking like a clock. He had written fake emails from my work account. Crafted drafts that made me sound unstable. And logged every time he'd accessed my workstation after hours using a stolen admin password. He'd copied my entire Project Halo folder, all 847 files. Every line of code I'd written at 3 a.m. And he hadn't even bothered to delete the original. He just took it. Like he owned it. Like I never existed. Have you ever had to dig through someone's digital life to find the truth? Knowing that what you find will shatter everything they built, I didn't hesitate. I saved everything. I made 3 copies. One on my laptop's encrypted drive. One on a portable SSD I kept in my backpack. And one on an external drive I took to a storage unit across town at 2 a.m. The next morning, I drove there with the windows down, the cold air biting my face, and I shoved the drive into a box labeled old clothes. The night guard didn't even look up as I walked past. I backed up every email, every log, every draft, every IP address. I sealed it all in digital concrete. That evidence folder he'd built against me, the one meant to bury me, became the rope I'd use to hang him. I had the truth. I had the proof. And I was just getting started. But that evidence, as airtight as it was only enough to get him fired from Hayward. I wanted more. I needed to understand the full weight of what he had done and whether there was anyone else in the company who had helped him. So I didn't stop. I opened his personal email again. The one I'd already cracked open like a tin can. This time, I used the password reset feature for his work account. The security question was, "What was the name of your first pet?" I typed Max without hesitating. The system let me in. I was inside Hayward Technologies again, not as an employee. Not even as a visitor. I was a ghost in their system, floating through the servers with no footprint. No trace. I set up a monitoring script that logged every keystroke he made on his work computer, every login, every document he opened, every email he sent or received. I watched him for 3 days straight. Sleeping only in 2-hour naps on my folding chair, he thought he had deleted the trail. He had cleared his browser history, emptied his trash folder, even run a disk cleanup tool. But I had built a map that led straight to him anyway, a map made of metadata, timestamps, and the residue of his arrogance. What I found next made my blood run cold. Buried in a folder labeled Q4, projections were encrypted messages exchanged with a series of email addresses I didn't recognize. The encryption was amateurish, a simple PGP wrapper, but the content was anything but. He was sending raw outputs from Project Halo, my algorithm, to people who had no business receiving them. I traced the IP addresses, one from a Cayman Islands shell company, one from a known short-selling hedge fund in New York, one from a competitor's internal VPN. He wasn't just stealing my work. He was using it to commit crimes, insider trading on a massive scale. He was selling the predictions my code generated to people who could profit from market moves before they happened. My heart didn't pound. It just ticked like a clock. I saved every encrypted message, every access log, every timestamped IP address. I had him, not just as a thief, but as a criminal, and I knew exactly when and where to deliver the final blow. I followed the digital trail like a thread through a dark maze. From the encrypted messages, I branched outward, tracing bank transactions, following the money through shell accounts registered in the Cayman Islands. Each one a layer of fog he thought would hide him. But the fog was thin. The accounts were connected by a single signatory, a numbered corporation called Westgate Holdings. And Westgate Holdings was linked to a private banking account in Zurich that had received exactly $1 the Black 20 says, $2 million on the day Daniel's quarterly projections were published. The same day, a competitor's stock tanked 17%. I matched the timestamps. The money moved quiet and fast, but it left a residue, timestamps in the milliseconds between his login and the transfer authorization, IP addresses routing through a VPN in Panama. Then back to his home office. He was running Project Halo against Hayward's competitor list almost daily. I saw the queries in the logs, snapshots of market sentiment analysis, risk scores for companies like Apex Dynamics and CoreBridge Solutions, companies that had no reason to be in a marketing executive's files. He wasn't just scanning for fun. He was extracting the algorithm's predictions. This company will drop in 6 weeks. That one will spike after a product reveal, and packaging them into private reports for hedge funds. One fund alone made $4. $3 million, shorting a stock he identified as vulnerable. And Daniel collected his cut through a series of wire transfers that never touched his personal bank account. He had built a network of middlemen, ex-college buddies and former fraternity brothers who handled the cash in exchange for a percentage. It was elegant, brutal, and utterly invisible until I started pulling the threads. I sat on my mattress at 3 a.m. The laptop balanced on my knees, and watched the transactions scroll across my screen like a heartbeat monitor. My heart didn't pound. It just ticked like a clock. Steady. Cold. I was no longer his sister. I was a data analyst examining a specimen. He wasn't just a thief. He was a high-level criminal. He was bleeding Hayward dry with one hand while taking credit for saving it with my algorithm in the other. The same code that predicted the collapse he caused was the code he used to pretend he was a hero. The irony would have been beautiful if it weren't so sickening. I copied every bank statement, every encrypted chat log, every time-stamped query. I organized them into folders, one for insider trading, one for money laundering, one for corporate espionage. By the time I was done, the file was 284 pages. I stored it on 3 separate encrypted drives, one in my backpack, one taped under my desk, one in a safe deposit box at a bank across town. I didn't tell a single soul, not even Mike. This was my operation. Have you ever discovered something about someone you thought you knew that completely changed your view of them? Not just disappointed, you redefined them entirely. That's what I felt. The brother who had been the son of our family was actually a black hole, pulling everything into himself and leaving nothing behind. And I was about to make sure the light was turned off for good. I spent the next week compiling every piece of evidence into a single, organized file. Emails that showed Daniel fabricating reports about me. Access logs that placed him at my workstation after hours. Bank transfers hundreds of thousands funneled through shell accounts I'd traced back to Westgate Holdings. Encrypted chats with hedge fund managers where he bragged about inside information. I cross-referenced timestamps, highlighted duplicates, wrote a summary table that even a jury could follow. The file totaled 18 months of data, from the day he copied Project Halo to the day he sold the last batch of competitor intelligence. I saved it 3 times, one encrypted USB in my pocket, one taped under my desk, one in a safe deposit box downtown. It wasn't revenge. I told myself as I closed the laptop. Revenge is emotional. Messy. People scream. They cry. They leave fingerprints. This was correction. This was balance. This was truth. I leaned back on my mattress, staring at the ceiling. The file existed. The truth existed. What I needed was the right moment, a stage big enough that the fall would echo. I checked my phone out of habit, scrolling through tech news while my freelance clients waited for invoices. That's when I saw it, a press release from Hayward Technologies. Time stamped 2 hours ago. Daniel Nolan, promoted to Executive Vice President of Data Systems Company, cites visionary leadership behind Guardian AI. They were throwing him a party. A huge one. At the Glass Room, the most exclusive event venue in downtown Chicago. All mirrored walls and city lights. Where billionaires celebrated mergers and founders toasted IPOs. The date was 6 days away. I set my phone down and smiled. It was perfect. The higher they rise, the harder they fall. He'd be on stage, in front of every investor, every board member, every journalist who mattered. And I'd have front row seats. I started drafting the anonymous email that would bring the whole thing down. I sat down at my folding table. The only piece of furniture in my apartment that wasn't a mattress, and opened a secure email service I'd set up 3 months ago through a VPN that bounced through 4 countries. It was the night before the party. And I said them instruides p.m. The city outside my window was a grid of lights. But I didn't look at it. I typed the email in one go. My fingers steady. My breathing even. Subject your company. Body everything you think is true about Daniel Nolan is a lie. Everything you've been told about Haley Nolan is a lie. If you want to save your company, Be at the glass room tomorrow night at 9 p.m. An associate will meet you at the door. I paused, my cursor hovering over the attachment button. I attached one file, just one, a single bank transfer from a known shell corporation. Westgate Holdings. To Daniel Nolan's personal account. The amount was $1. 2 millions. The date was the day after his last big quarterly win, when the Guardian system was rolled out company-wide, and the stock bounced 8 points. It was the cleanest piece of evidence I had a direct wire from a hidden account to his name. Timed perfectly with the insider trading spike. No ambiguity. I hit send. The confirmation bar slid across the screen. Your message has been sent. I closed the laptop. The room was dark, except for the glow of the microwave clock. I sat there for a full minute, listening to my own heartbeat. It was steady. Calm. Not fast. Not slow. Just ticking like a metronome. I had spent 18 months in the dark, scraping crumbs, watching my brother climb on the ladder he built from my bones. And now the ladder was about to crack. I stood up and went to my closet. It was a narrow wardrobe in the corner, its door hanging crooked because the hinge had broken weeks ago and I hadn't bothered to fix it. Inside, I had one good dress, a simple black one. Sleeveless. Modest. With a straight neckline. I'd bought it 3 years ago for a friend's wedding, and it had hung in the back ever since. Untouched. I pulled it out. It was still in the dry cleaning bag. I laid it on the mattress. Then I opened the small jewelry box I kept under the sink. Inside was a pair of silver studs, fake, but they looked real enough in dim light. I put them on the dresser. I was going to a party. I was going to walk into that glass and marble ballroom, past the check-in desk, past the laughing guests, and stand in the center of my brother's triumph. And when the doors swung open at 9 p.m., I would be the only one not surprised. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the window, watching the first gray light crawl over the city, and I felt nothing but a quiet, cold certainty. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is hot. Messu. Full of screaming and tears. This was balance. The universe had been tilted my whole life, with all the weight on Daniel's side. 10 hours from now, I would put my hand on the scale. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? Because that's the moment I was walking into, not to destroy a brother, but to reclaim the life he stole. The elevator ride up was silent except for the hum of cables and the soft chime as the floors ticked past. I stood in my simple black dress, the fake silver studs in my ears, my reflection staring back at me from the polished metal doors. My hands were steady. My breath was even. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. But now that it was here, I felt nothing but a cold, hollow certainty. The doors opened onto the 52nd floor, and I stepped into a hallway lined with mirrors, each reflection multiplying me into a dozen versions of the same woman, none of them looking like the failure Daniel had described. I could hear the party before I saw it, the low thrum of a live band, the clink of glasses, the overlapping chatter of voices that sounded expensive even from a distance. I walked toward the double oak doors at the end of the hall, my heels clicking on the marble floor. A woman in a headset stood at a small table beside the entrance, a clipboard in her hand. She looked up when she saw me, her smile professional and automatic. "Ma'am, can I help you? This is a private event." I stopped. I didn't smile. "I'm Haley Nolan," I said. "Daniel is expecting me." She glanced down at her clipboard, running a finger down the list. When she looked back up, her smile had tightened. "I'm sorry. You're not on the list." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just stood there, looking at her, my face calm. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She looked at her clipboard again. Then at the doors. Then back at me. I'll need to check with someone. Go ahead, I said. My voice flat, she turned to speak into her headset. Flustered. I didn't wait. I stepped past her, pushed open the oak door, and walked inside. The music dimmed as I crossed the threshold. Or maybe it just felt that way because every conversation stopped at the same instant. Every head turned. The room was a glittering cavern of glass and light floor-to-ceiling windows, showing the city spread out like a diamond quilt. Black marble floors reflecting the chandeliers, mirrored ceilings that made the crowd look infinite. And in the center of it all, on a small raised stage, stood my brother Daniel. A glass of champagne in his hand, his grin still frozen from whatever toast he had been delivering. I saw my father first. He was standing near the stage, gripping his own glass. His smile vanished the second his eyes landed on me. It didn't fade. It dropped. Like a mask cut from a string. His face flushed deep red, then went pale. Anger and humiliation warred behind his eyes. My mother stood beside him, her hand frozen mid-reach, her expression sliding from confusion to fear. The silence was so thick I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass across the room. I started walking. The crowd parted like water. People stepped back, some holding their drinks close to their chests, as if I carried something contagious. They didn't want to be near the failure, the punchline of Daniel's joke. I felt their stares on my skin. Hot and curious, I kept my eyes fixed on the stage. On Daniel, whose smile had turned into a stiff line. I walked right up to him, stopping a few feet from the stage. The room held its breath. He looked down at me, his eyes cold and sharp. Didn't expect you to show up. Sis. I like surprises, I said, and I gave him a small, broken smile. Let them think I was broken. Let them all think that, because in 2 minutes, the real surprise would walk through those oak doors, and Daniel's glass empire would shatter into 1,000 pieces. Daniel's smile was tight, a thin line that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned against the bar, one hand gripping a champagne flute like it was a weapon. Didn't expect you to show up. Sis. His voice was low, meant only for me. But the nearby guests had already turned their heads. I gave him a faint, broken-looking smile. Let them think I was broken. I like surprises. He stepped closer, his breath sour with champagne. You really shouldn't be here. Haile. You're embarrassing, Dad. Am I? I looked over his shoulder at the digital clock above the bar. Osam sedemin pedaset p. M. 3 minutes. I turned back to him and let my voice drop to a whisper. You look nervous. Danny. His jaw tightened. Get out. No, I said, my voice still quiet. Steady. I don't think I will. He stared at me for a long second, then grabbed a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Without another word, he stepped onto the small temporary stage near the center of the room. The band quieted. A spotlight found him. He was buying time, playing the part of the golden boy. Friends, family, colleagues, his voice boomed across the room. Confident and warm. Dad. We did it. My father raised his glass, eyes wet with pride. You did it. Son. Daniel soaked in the applause, basking in the warmth of a room that loved him. He was the king of the room for 4 more minutes. I just stood there. I didn't clap. My silence was a black hole in the middle of the bright, noisy room, and Daniel could feel it. He looked at me, his smile becoming a weapon. Sharp and cold. Not everyone is cut out for this kind of pressure, he said. His eyes locked on mine. Not everyone can make it. The room went quiet. They knew he was talking about me. This was the part of the show they'd been waiting for, the family drama. The joke. I could hear someone stifle a laugh. He raised his glass higher. To my sister Haley, she proves that some of us just aren't cut out for corporate life. The laughter came again. Louder this time. It rolled across the room like a wave. The sound of a pack of wolves, happy to have found the weakest one. Have you ever had to stand still while the people you trusted most held a mirror up to your supposed failures? That moment teaches you something. It taught me that silence can be louder than any applause. He didn't know what was about to hit him. He didn't know that the clock was ticking down to 9. And that the doors would swing open any second. But I did. And I let him have his stage. His poisoned toast. His last moment in the sun. Because glass always breaks. And the higher you climb, the sharper the shards. Right on cue 9 p.m. Exactly, the main ballroom doors swung open hard, slamming against the walls with a crack that cut through the laughter like a gunshot. The laughter died instantly. Not faded. Not quieted. Died. The music stopped mid-note. The band freezing with their instruments raised. The entire room turned toward the entrance. It wasn't a waiter with a tray. It wasn't a late guest sneaking in through the side. It was Mr. Robert Henderson, the CEO of Hayward Technologies, a tall man in his late 60s with white hair swept back and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He never came to parties. Ever. That was company legend. Henderson attended quarterly board meetings and nothing else, but he was here now. Standing in the doorway in a dark suit that cost more than my rent for a year. Flanking him were 2 board members. I recognized from the company website a sharp-faced woman in a navy blazer and a bald man with glasses who looked like he hadn't smiled in a decade. And behind them, 2 very large men in dark suits, with earpieces. Real security. Not the kind that checks lists at the door. The air was sucked out of the room. You could feel the panic ripple through the crowd like a change in barometric pressure. Champagne flutes stopped mid-toast. Smiles faltered. Daniel's smile didn't just falter, it froze. It looked like a mask that had cracked right down the middle. For a split second, I saw something behind his eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine terror. He recovered fast salesman instincts and stepped down from the stage. Both hands outstretched. Mr. Henderson, I wasn't expecting you. This is a wonderful surprise. His voice was too loud. Too bright. Cracking at the edges. Henderson didn't even look at him. He stood perfectly still. His gaze sweeping the room slowly. Deliberately. He looked at the champagne fountain. He looked at the laughing guests who had now turned into silent statues. He looked at my father, who had gone pale as paper. Then his eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on me. I was standing alone in my simple black dress. The only person in the room not wearing a mask. I met his haze. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just waited. Henderson started walking toward me right past Daniel like he was a piece of furniture. Right past my stunned parents. Right through the parted sea of guests who scrambled to get out of his way. The whole room watched. The CEO of Hayward Technologies, the man who never attended parties, was walking straight toward the unstable failure. The ghost. The joke. And when he stopped a foot in front of me, I knew the glass empire had already shattered. Mr. Henderson stopped a foot in front of me. The entire room held its breath. I could feel it. A collective pause. The air thick with confusion and curiosity. He extended his hand. Palm open. Steady. Ms. Nolan. He said. His voice low but clear, carrying across the silence. I'm Robert Henderson. I'm glad you came. I took his hand. It was firm. Dry. Varm. I didn't shake it, I held it for just a moment. Letting the weight of the gesture settle. Mr. Henderson. Behind him, I could see Daniel's face contort. The smile was gone. replaced by a twitching confusion that made him look like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "Sir," he said, his voice cracking as he pushed past a cluster of guests. "Sir, I think there's a misunderstanding. This is my sister Haley. She doesn't work for us anymore." Henderson didn't turn around immediately. He kept his eyes on me for one more beat. Then slowly, deliberately, rotated his head to look at Daniel. It was the first time he had truly looked at him all night. And it was a look of pure, cold contempt. "Yes," Henderson said. "We know." The two words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Daniel's mouth opened and closed. He looked at me. At Henderson. Back at me. He was a salesman, he could read a room, charm a boardroom, close a deal. But he couldn't read a single line of code. And he couldn't read the look on Henderson's face. He was out of his depth. And he knew it. Henderson turned back to me, his expression softening. "We received your message, Ms. Nolan. And the file, it was very illuminating." I let a small, calm smile touch my lips. "I thought you might find it interesting." "Mr. Henderson." Daniel was sweating now. I could see beads of moisture on his forehead. The way his hand trembled as he reached for his champagne glass, and then stopped. He looked back and forth between us, his eyes darting like a cornered animal trying to find an exit. "What message?" he demanded, his voice too loud, too high. "Sir." "What's going on? This is my party." Henderson ignored him. He was still looking at me. For a long moment, I just stood there, letting the silence work. I could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, my father's pale face, my mother's tears, the guests frozen mid-sip, and Daniel, the golden boy, cracked open in front of them all. Have you ever had that moment, the one where you realize that the person who hurt you most is about to be unmasked in front of everyone they ever fooled? It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like the first breath after drowning. "Mr. Henderson." Daniel tried again, stepping forward, his hand outstretched. "I don't know what she told you, but she's unstable. I warned you about her. You're fired." "Daniel," Henderson said flatly, still not looking at him. "Sit down and wait for security." The words fell like a stone into still water. The ripples spread across the room, a gasp, a whisper, the sound of someone dropping a champagne flute. My father's face went gray. My mother covered her mouth, and I just stood there, my hand still tingling from the handshake. Watching the glass empire shatter, Henderson finally turned to face the room. The music had died completely. Even the ice in the champagne flute seemed to stop shifting. "For 6 months," Henderson said, his voice carrying through the silence like a blade. "We have been operating under the belief that the Guardian AI system was developed by Daniel Nolan." Daniel puffed up, grabbing at the lifeline. "It was, Sir. I built it. It saved this company." "That's not true." The words landed like a punch. Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "We ran a deep source analysis this evening after receiving new information." Henderson's eyes swept the crowd, then settled on me. "Your sister's code, Project Halo, was found embedded in our main AI system. Every line, every single module." Daniel's face drained of all color. He went white, not pale. But white? The color of paper. Of shock. Of something crumbling from the inside. "That's a lie. She's unstable. I told you she's emotional. The code doesn't lie." "Mr. Nolan." Henderson's voice was ice. "And it's not emotional. The patent for Project Halo was filed under her name 2.5 years ago. We confirmed it an hour ago." I heard a noise to my left, a small, choking sound. My father. He was staring at me. his face a mask of something I had never seen before. It wasn't pride. It wasn't anger. It was horror. The horror of realizing that the child he had dismissed, the ghost at the dinner table, had been carrying the truth all along. Have you ever had that moment, the one where you watch someone you love, realize they've been blind for years? It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like the first breath after drowning. Daniel was shaking his head, backing away. No, she gave it to me. It was a gift. A family project. Right. Haley, tell them. Tell them you helped me. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My silence was his answer. Henderson waited a beat. Then continued. But that isn't the worst of it. Stealing your sister's work, that's a family matter. A disgusting one. But what you did with her code, that's our matter. He nodded to the female board member. She stepped forward. A table in her hands. We've also confirmed insider trading. Data manipulation. Shell accounts in the Cayman Islands. She read the charges like she was reading a weather report. Your brother used your algorithm to predict market risks and then sold that data to competitors and hedge funds. No. Daniel whispered. No. That's impossible. The bank transfers say otherwise. Henderson said. They match. To the dollar. The value of the data you were leaking. My father's champagne glass slipped from his hand. It didn't shatter, the room was carpeted. It just thudded. Adul. Vet. Final sound that seemed to echo long after the glass had stopped rolling. It was the sound of everything falling. Daniel lunged at me. He didn't get 2 steps before the security guards moved fast. Sil. Professional. They each grabbed an arm, twisting him back. And his expensive suit jacket ripped at the shoulder with a sound like tearing paper. Get your hands off me, he screamed, his voice cracking into something high and childish. He thrashed, kicking at the air, his polished shoes scuffing the black marble. You ruined me. You ruined our family, Dad. Tell them she's lying. My father didn't move. He stood exactly where he'd been when the champagne glass left his hand. A statue staring at the floor. At the spilled liquid creeping across the dark carpet like a stain spreading through the family name. His face was gray. His mouth hung slightly open. He looked old. Older than I'd ever seen him. Older than the man who'd laughed at my bike accident. Older than the man who'd told me I wasn't cut out for corporate life. He had nothing left to give. Take him out of here, Henderson said. His voice flat. Final. The guards started walking Daniel toward the doors. He fought them every step, twisting his body, his head snapping toward me as they passed. His face was inches from mine, contorted with a hatred so pure, it looked like it hurt him. I will destroy you. Haley, he screamed. Spit landed on my cheek. I will end you. You will be nothing. You hear me? Nothing. I just watched him. I didn't wipe my face. I didn't flinch. I watched until the security guards pulled him through the oak doors. His shouts fading into the hallway. The doors clicked shut. The silence that followed was heavy, thick as water, pressing against my eardrums. My mother was crying somewhere behind me. A soft, shuddering sound. The party was over. The guests stood frozen, still holding their glasses, their phones capturing the wreckage. Nobody moved. Henderson turned to me. His face had softened, the granite replaced by something almost human. Ms. Nolan, he said, and his voice was quiet now. Meant only for me. On behalf of Hayward Technologies, I am profoundly sorry. He paused, then continued. Danielle Nolan's position is vacant. We need someone to lead the data systems division. Someone who actually understands the technology. Someone who built it. He met my eyes. We would like you to take over as interim head. Effective immediately. I looked at my father. He was still standing in the same spot. His face, a storm of emotions, humiliation. Shock, anger, and beneath it all, something I'd never seen there before, fear. He was afraid of me. The golden boy was gone. The ghost was offered his entire kingdom. He had backed the wrong horse. And now he had nothing. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? I asked the room softly. Not really a question. Just the truth hanging in the air. I turned back to my father and let my voice carry clear across the silent space. Well, Dad, I said. Guess I'm good at something after all. No one laughed this time. After 28 years, he finally had nothing to say. When I walked out of the glass room, I didn't take the elevator with the CEO. I didn't stay to talk to the lawyers. I walked past my mother's tears and my father's silence. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, weightless. Not empty. Not angry. Balanced. People say revenge doesn't heal, that it leaves you hollow. But this wasn't revenge. Revenge is hot and messy. This was cold. This was correction. I didn't burn his world down. I just put my hand on the scale and let the truth do the rest. Daniel had spent his whole life building a kingdom on my bones. But he forgot one thing. Glass always breaks. And the quieter you are, the harder you hit when you finally move. So if you've ever been treated like you're nothing, remember that the loudest people are usually standing on the thinnest floor. You don't have to scream. Just build something true. And when the moment comes, let it speak for itself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, share your own moment of justice in the comments. And if you want more stories about finding your power when the world counts you out, hit that subscribe button. I'll be here. Still standing.